Okay, this is a video for Chorus from Judas Maccabaeus by Handel. This is number 5 in Suzuki Book 2, and I just want to give you some tips on what to look out for. Okay, so let's look through just very quickly. You can see that as far as positions, the only little section where you have a change in position is measure, starting at the last beat of measure 11 through 12, and then just a little bit of measure 13, and then you go back to first position. So as far as positions are concerned, you're not shifting back and forth too much. So I think that should be a good thing to know. The other difficulty I would say with this is that you really want to look out for your rhythms, right? So you have several different kinds of rhythms. You have your half notes, you have your dotted quarter notes, and followed by an eighth note, which I think is probably the most complicated rhythm here. Then you have a series of eighth notes, usually 4 in a row. Then you have your regular quarter notes, and then you have dotted half notes, which are 3/4 notes. Yeah. So I think we can actually look at all of those rhythms in the very first line. So let's take a look. So it starts with a half note. So half notes are 2 quarter notes, right? So you want to count, if I was counting 3, 4, 1, 2, that would be a half note, right? So that's not too hard. You probably have done half notes before. The next rhythm that you see is a dotted quarter note plus an eighth note. Now remember, a dotted quarter note has 3 eighth notes, or you can think of it as 1.5 quarter notes, right? And if a quarter note is 2 eighth notes, then 1.5 quarter notes would be 3 eighth notes, yeah? And then that's followed by another eighth note. So if you add the dotted quarter note and the eighth note that follows, that's a total of 4 eighth notes, which means, remember, if 2 eighth notes equals 1 quarter, and you have 4 of them, you have 2 quarters. 2 quarters equals a half note, right? So the first measure is actually 4 quarter notes, which if you look at the meter, which is common time, it's 4 quarter notes per measure, so it adds up, okay? So the question is, how do you do the dotted eighth note rhythm really well? So in order to do that, you really have to be thinking in eighth notes. So if I'm thinking quarter, 1, 2, 1, 2, and the numbers are quarters, in order to divide the quarter note into eighth notes, I have to use 1 and 2 and, right? And then if I'm doing that 1 and 2 and, I'm hearing all 4 eighth notes, or 2 eighth notes in a quarter note, right? So let's just do it with the first half note, 1 and 2 and. So that's the same as me counting 1, 2, right? All you're hearing, the only difference you're hearing is when I say and, I'm verbalizing the eighth note that you don't really hear. So 1 and 2 and. If it helps you, you can even count in just straight numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now doing the dotted quarter note, you want to count eighth notes in your head. You can count it out loud if you want, just to practice, but you really want to think to yourself, dotted quarter is 3 eighth notes followed by 1 eighth note. So I should hear 1 and 2 and. So the and of 2 is actually that second finger, the last note in the first measure. So 1 and 2, all 3 of these is the dotted quarter note. 1 and 2 and. So 1 and 2 and. 1 and 2 and. I'm still counting half notes. Now let me do the dotted quarter plus eighth note. 1 and 2 and. 1 and 2 and. So if I were to divide that into separate boats, it would sound 1 and 2 and, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So let me just actually, just in case the 1 and 2 and counting method is confusing, for now I'm just going to count in 4. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are 8 notes. So from the very beginning of the measure, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so I changed on 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah. Okay, so that's your dotted quarter plus 8 note rhythm that you want to keep in your mind really clear, because again, I think that's probably the most difficult rhythm that's in this piece. And dotted rhythms, you're going to see them all over the place. So it's really good to be able to know how to count those rhythms in your head really early on. Okay, next measure, not too bad. You already know how to do half notes. So if I'm counting in quarter notes now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, not too bad. Next measure, you have 4 8 notes. Now, this is where you want to go back to thinking about how to count 8 notes. You can either do 1 and 2 and, or 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it's the same as the dotted quarter plus 8 note actually, except now you're going to hear every single 8 note. Before it was 3 8 notes as 1 dotted quarter plus 1 8 note. Now there's just 8 note, 8 note, 8 note, 8 note. So this is a little bit easier. Yeah. So okay, let me go back to the second measure, and I'm going to count in 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So I hope that made sense. I'm just counting in 8 notes. So when you get to measure 3, you should move on every single count that I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, because we're counting in 8 notes. Yeah. Then you've got 2 quarter notes, and then at the end you have a dotted half note, which is 3 quarter notes. So let's do that whole measure 3. It's going to start down bow, and I want you to also do the quarter note too. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So I hope you caught that. When I played the quarter notes, you're moving after you count 1, 2, because a quarter note has 2 8 notes. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So the last one should be straightforward. If you're counting in quarter notes, you should hear 3. If you're counting in 8 notes, it really depends. If you're counting in the 1 and 2 and 3 and method, which is really what I prefer, but it's sometimes confusing at the beginning. You will count 1 and 2 and 3 and, or if you're counting 8 notes as numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the rest is a quarter note, so you go 7, 8. Yeah. So this is a really good example of eventually your mind should constantly be subdividing. You should always be thinking in a smaller unit of measurement. You shouldn't, it's different when it comes to phrasing, how you think of it as in terms of the pulse, but you really want to be able to calculate exactly how long each note is, and subdividing really helps. So I'm going to play the whole first line, and I'm going to count in my way, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but I'll count while I play so you can see how I'm dividing it, okay? So 2 for nothing, meaning 2 beats. I'm going to count 2 beats and then I'll come in on the downbeat. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and 4 and, yeah. And just remember, you've got to rest, so you don't hold that D for longer than 3 whole quarter notes, and then you've got a quarter note rest. Okay. All right. The other thing that I think is tricky, the next 2 lines are actually, the next line is pretty similar. We've got the same rhythmic difficulties, just different notes and different combinations. Let's go all the way to measure 11. This is where on the last beat you're going to go into second position. So I'm going to start right at measure 11. 3, you're playing the open D, your left hand should already be moving to get to the C, which is your second finger in upper second position. So move your hand now. And the idea is that your hand is prepared before you actually have to play the note. Yeah, you're anticipating this new note. Because if I waited to the last minute, I could do it, but there's a little bit of a hiccup now, and it looks and sounds a little bit frantic, which this whole piece is not frantic at all. It's just maestoso, meaning majestic, very beautiful, dignified, elegant. Think of kings and queens walking through. So you don't see them running to anywhere because they're late. Very majestic. So prepare your hand and shift to second position. Okay. So then 2, 3. After the rest of the retake. Now here, it's a little bit tricky. Stay in the upper second, play on the D string. Okay, so let's break that down. So if you take a look, you'll see 4, 3, 0, 1, right? But if you look at the 4, that note, which is an A, and then you look at the 0, that note, you'll see that that's also an A. It's the exact same note actually, right? So you know that you can play the exact same note in more than one place. Once you start learning more positions, you'll see that there are many different places you can play the same note actually. So make sure you don't do this. 4, 3. Don't play the A twice. In other words, don't do 4, 3, 4, 0, because now you've added an extra note. Okay, make sure you do 4, 3, and then the next note should be the open A. Don't play the 4 again. You'll be tempted, but don't do that. Okay, and you might be wondering, well, why am I playing this A on the A string instead of the 4 when it feels comfortable? And the real reason is because at this point, you're limited to only second position or first position. So if you were to play, it's actually pretty hard to shift from second position to first position across 2 different strings under a single slur playing 8 notes. It's a very complicated motion actually, and something that you have to make it sound like there's no gap between the notes, and that's really hard to do at this level. So I think the reason for the 4, 3, 0 is to buy you time to shift from second to first position by giving you an open A. Just like the first shift that we went to, that D is there, that open D is there to help you get this second position while you're playing an open D string, right? So same thing here, just while you're playing the open A, the minute you play, your hand should start moving to first position, so your B is ready. Yeah, so when you get to even really high level, you'll probably do something. You'll probably stay on the D string, but because we're trying to focus purely on the positions that you know, which is first position, and in this case upper second position, it sort of limits the kind of fingerings that you can have. But I think the one that's written in is a good idea. So make sure you follow that, okay? Aside from that, I think the rest is pretty similar to what we covered on the first line. So I'm going to play the whole thing, and I'll count through the whole thing, and then try to play through with me so that you hear the count, you hear me playing, and then you hear yourself playing too, okay? Okay, so 2 beats for nothing. I'm going to count 3 and 4 and then I'm going to play on the downbeat. Yeah? Okay. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and rest. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay. And note just a couple of things. There's so many things that you could talk about: the dynamics, the hairpins that you have, and the rallentando at the end, and then the fermata. Just one. I don't want to overload you with too many things right now. So just remember at the very end, you have a fermata over the rest, which is a very interesting marking, because usually fermatas are written over notes. You're sort of holding it longer, generally twice as long as the written in rhythm, but it's on the rest and it's on the very last note. And the idea, I think, is that you really want to hold at the end. Don't do something where you just sort of do that, because then you're sort of ruining this character at the end, this tapering, this, it's like the curtains are closing slowly, whereas if you just drop your bow, it's like the curtains are falling to the ground, and you know, it sort of ruins a very beautiful moment at the end. So make sure you slowly take down your bow. Yeah, be an artist, be a performer, and make sure that your motion is elegant, because if your motions are elegant, your music will be elegant as well. Okay, all right, good. I hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions.